Ready? Play.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm covering all three bases for all three of us. Good evening where I am. Good afternoon, Vivek, and good morning, Stephen. Stephen, how you doing?
That's great. I'm doing well. Yeah, you're right. It's top of the morning here on the west coast of British Columbia, so it couldn't be better.
And Vivek, good afternoon. How you doing?
Good. I've got a full lunch in me, so I'm ready to go. I'm charged up.
I'm fully charged as well, having just had dinner. And maybe Stephen, I don't know what a typical breakfast is in Vancouver, Stephen.
I mean, I just had half a bagel and I've had 2 cups of coffee, so it's kind of like the journalist diet, I think.
Indeed. Coffee keeps us going. For those of you tuning in, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are here, as we wrote in the description, to discuss the Australian Open on the men's side. I did a video a couple of days ago on the women's, so make sure you go and check that out with Caitlin from Racket Magazine. But listen, Stephen, let's start with you as you're kind of at the top of the screen, so to speak. What did you make of the men's tournament as a whole, if you like, this year?
Well, I thought there was great, overarching storylines coming in. To me, the main one was obviously Djokovic. I called it the revenge tour. No matter how you see Djokovic or what happened to him last year in Australia, you can understand that he's definitely on the revenge tour, and he's coming to win the tournament and prove that he was going to win it last year, and that and he, as a guy who has definitely taken issue with crowds being against him in the past, he's a guy that loves getting revenge, and fair enough, all the power to him. So that was interesting, obviously. And then, I thought that it was disappointing though, the tournament, and it was amazing to see him come through, and it was a pretty decent final. But just as we were speaking before we got on here, John, the tournament in general, I thought was a little bit without, didn't have, I think the best matches almost happened in the first week with Andy Murray was kind of the star of the tournament, in my opinion. And then, seeing a 35-year-old guy beat everyone who is in their prime so easily. And then even Stefanos Tsitsipas, who does have the skill and the ability to beat him he should in a final, even to see him get kind of routined in a bit of a sense, I thought was a little bit, not exciting for the average tennis fan. So, but super awesome to see, especially for Djokovic fans, to see him accomplish what he was set out to do. So good tournament in general. I thought though a little bit lacking suspense, to say the least.
Vivek, how did you feel?
Yeah, along the same lines as Stephen, I think it was a bit flat. I think when you look at the US Open, coming into that tournament, you were saying, okay, Djokovic isn't there. So you wanted to see that younger generation step up to the plate. And so you got these great matchups, right? Everyone remembers the Alcaraz matchup with Sinner and how amazing that match was. And you're saying, okay, this is what the future of tennis looks like. You had that Tiafoe upset against Nadal, and you're saying, okay, we're on to something here. And I think especially looking at the draw beforehand, I was looking at the one section of the draw where you potentially had Tsitsipas playing Medvedev, or Félix playing against Medvedev or Tsitsipas, or both potentially. And to not get those matchups, I think kind of hurt the tournament on the men's side. And obviously you had your share of upsets on the women's side as well. But I think for the men, especially now in this period where we are, I think as fans, we all want some kind of certainty. And so to get these mystery matchups where, you're going into it thinking, okay, there's no real appeal here, I think that's what kind of hurt the tournament.
Yeah, my generic thoughts are Novak didn't need any assistance whatsoever in Melbourne, and I'm pretty sure he would have won the tournament no matter what, but he may have had a slightly bumpier ride had all of these dominoes kind of fell for him as well, with perhaps the court conditions, playing at night, etc. I heard Gil Gross mentioning, for example, the low bounce. In addition to that, and probably even more significantly, Alcaraz a week before, 2 weeks before, whatever it is, pulls out the tournament injured. We don't know what Alcaraz would have showed up, bearing in mind, I don't think he's shown anything like the New York form that he had shown, but still, it would have been a question mark. Suddenly, if Alcaraz gets some momentum and he's in that final, for example, you're thinking, can he do it? He can. We know he can, but there was never quite that belief with Tsitsipas. I even think stuff like Sebi Korda, he posed a few questions in Adelaide, didn't get the chance to pose more questions, if you like. Holger Rune, the net cord. There were so many things that went on in that match. It was, in many ways, the most dramatic of the tournament, Andy Murray aside. But there were just so curious as well. All of the potential banana skins that could have posed questions for Novak just never occurred. But listen, Stephen, let's show some optimism and positivity. I mean, Novak's kind of, it's a Rafa Philippe Chatrier-esque kind of dominance here, and arguably it's even more impressive on what could be described as a neutral surface, if you like.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, it's incredible watching like the master at something work. Like with the flatter balls this tournament, like you mentioned, he almost went flatter with his strokes a little bit to get through the court more effectively, and he looked like he was out hitting, like he was hitting bigger than all of his opponents throughout the entire tournament, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because like he's always he's a sneaky big guy too. Like everyone's like he's 6'2", and he's like definitely a little longer than Rafa and Federer. So he uses a heavy racket, which helped I think during this tournament, which people might not know. But typically like he's going to play, he'll play like a Jan Lennard Struff in the second round, easily beat him. But, Jan Lennard does hit bigger than him, or play Khachanov or Berrettini or, someone like that who hits bigger than him. He'll just be way better and find a way to win. But he was like the obvious better player, but he was also hitting bigger. I don't think there was anyone all tournament, even Rublev, like when they went forehand to forehand, I still felt like Djokovic was going to win that and could easily push him back. And even with Stefanos, who I do think has a better forehand at this point in their careers, like it was still Djokovic was hitting it better this tournament and almost bigger, which is scary if you think about it. Like what is somebody in the tour right now going to do to beat Djokovic here at the Australian Open, unless he drops his level with age, which hasn't happened yet. It's just, so it's amazing to watch this guy play. Like he gets better year after year. And we're watching like the best anyone has ever played, especially on the Australian Open surface. So it's pretty crazy.
Vivek, what did you make of the final?
I think, Novak was always able to just hold Tsitsipas at arm's length. And I think we saw over the course of the tournament, the way the stats played out with Novak's opponents, everything that they were so successful at coming into playing Novak, they weren't able to do. Right. And you saw, for example, Tommy Paul saying, hey, part of my game plan was to, serve and volley. I didn't get to serve and volley all match. And, the fact that he can do these things with, a 3-centimeter hamstring tear is mind boggling. And I think one thing that I enjoyed watching while he was injured was how aggressive he was. And that's something we're not used to seeing from him. And it's something that I hope we see more of, because I think he is someone who is capable of redlining for longer, if that makes sense. And, I think you see other players who can get hot for certain stretches, but I think he's so efficient, so consistent, that I think he can afford to play this aggressive level that sort of separates him even further from the pack. We've seen Nick Kyrgios, for example, talk about the difference between Roger and Novak, and how Novak sort of makes you feel like you have a chance, but Roger can, make the court feel small and just make you feel terrible. I felt like Novak did that this tournament. He was the one that was making the court feel small. He was the one that was literally bullying you on the court. And so, just to touch back on the comparisons you made between Djokovic and Nadal, Djokovic at the Australian Open, Nadal at the French Open, I had tweeted this stat at the end of the tournament. So if you go back since Djokovic won in 2011, and we all know 2011 is really when things started to click for Novak. At the Australian Open, he is 71-3 and has 9 Australian Open titles since 2011. Nadal at the French Open since 2011, 74-2, 9 titles. So he's pretty much just as dominant at the Australian Open as Rafa has been. Obviously, Rafa has the great longevity, having done it pretty much since 2005. But if you just look at that period since 2011, he's untouchable. His three losses, Wawrinka, Istomin, and Chung.
Yeah.
And, those are pretty much, outside of the Wawrinka one, those are pretty much just freak losses.
And a bit like Nadal, I think 2 of those 3 came in a sort of sticky spell of about 18 months. I think Rafa's sticky spell kind of overlaps a bit with his. But yeah, sort of 15, 16, 17, 18 as it was for Novak, 17, 18. Interestingly, you touched on his 08 win there. When he won that 08, I remember thinking, oh, this guy might win 1 or 2. There was a very, 1 or 2 slams, He was going to be somebody who, the question would be, it wasn't quite the same with Rafa and Roger. It was like, oh, this guy's going to win many French. And if he gets the hang of it, he's going to win tournaments elsewhere. Roger was already, establishing himself in so many ways. But with Novak, it never felt like things were going to click for him in the way they did in 2011. And even when they did in 2011, it's like, this could be a Medvedev sort of 2019. Okay, a bit better over, more variety of surfaces. No one really quite saw this probably until sort of 14, 15, if you like. But anyway, I've gone off a tangent there. It was interesting what you said about Tommy Paul, Vivek, because I don't think he was directly responding to it, but indirectly, Craig O'Shaughnessy, the ATP Tour coach, he highlighted during the match, why isn't Tommy Paul doing this? Why isn't he coming to the net? Why isn't he? And Tommy's like, well, yeah, but it's easier said than done. You can't just come to the net off a random forehand.
Yeah, I think that's the pressure he puts with the depth that he's able to generate consistently. And again, when I talk about his ability to maybe redline for longer, that's the key, right? It's being able to hit the ball back on returns right at your feet, to go consistently beyond the serve box, get it consistently deep, have you on your toes, have you consistently backpedaling as opposed to getting on top of the ball. And that is where Novak is able to separate himself. That's why when you do see him lose, it is usually that Wawrinka type, right? That type of player who can get hot for extended stretches and just effectively take the racket out of your hand. And so I think if Novak really looks at this tournament and says, hey, there's something here with being this aggressive, it could separate him from the pack even further, which is scary to think at age, he's going to be 36 by the time the French Open arrives.
By the way, just to go a bit left field and keep you on your toes, I decide to, every now and again, I break the podcast rule of going, Vivek, tell me, Stephen, tell me. So I thought I'll just push that back towards you, Vivek, and I think you'll grasp it. But there was like a moment of, oh, I guess I should take this one.
Sorry about that.
Stephen, there we go. Here we go. Back to the old routine. Go on, Stephen.
Yeah, well, no, Tommy Paul is a great example for that, because I actually know his coach, Brad Stein, and I know that Tommy, since they've been working together, has worked at becoming a super all-court player. He's got great hands, and he's just a super good mover around the court. So his whole game is like trying to not be the baseline grinder. And yeah, it was really interesting to hear him say, like, he just blew up my game plan. Like, I just didn't feel confident doing what I had planned to do and doing the only things that really could have given him an advantage, which would have been like, moving Djokovic, forward and back, like bringing him forward with slices and then coming to the net himself. And then he said basically he just kind of got like mentally locked. That's his first time playing Djokovic. That's his first time at a major quarterfinal. So that's probably why that happened. I think, next time they play, it's not going to be any different. He's just going to have to go to the net and get past 3 or 4 times and then keep doing that, because like, that's the only way to, if you're scared of getting past, like, you're never going to be a good net player. So, and he knows that. It's just a one-off match thing, but it was interesting to hear how mentally Djokovic can mess with you.
Yeah. Talking to the final as well with you, Stephen, Stefanos Tsitsipas on the other side of the net. I did fear the final going the way it did, although there were 1 or 2 differences to what I expected. I thought that Novak would win because he would basically do less backhand unforced errors, backhand winners. It would all pretty much come down to the backhand. I thought it could be nip and tuck when it comes to the serve, but actually it was the forehand that let Stefanos down.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, that, his forehand, the forehand to forehand battle was going to be interesting to me, because I do feel like Tsitsipas's forehand is the best in the game right now. And what would have happened in that match if Stefanos had like the best forehand night of his career? Like, it would be, you got to think that he was winning that second set, and then you never know. Right. So he got to the tiebreaker in that second set, which he was, I would say, the better player in that whole set. Djokovic was kind of hanging on, and then his forehand blew up and he gave like 4 unforced errors in a 7-point tiebreak, and it's over, especially when you're playing Djokovic. So, and then you're down 2 sets, and then Djokovic became the better, cleaner player in the third set, only 4 unforced errors, I think, in that set. So, it's just too much to come from down 2 sets against Djokovic. And yeah, like, it's, players have bad nights. We always talk about the floors and the ceilings of players. Like, Djokovic's floor level is going to beat 99% of the players on tour. Tsitsipas, with his forehand breaking down a bit, he's still going to beat most players on tour, but he's not going to beat Djokovic. But the disappointing thing to me is that we know he can beat Djokovic. Like, he beat him twice out of the first 3 times they played, but he's gotten really mentally rattled, I think, after that French Open come from behind loss, as we all would, like, as is totally understandable. But it's just disappointing, because he's not really the player he could be when he in that matchup. I think when he's, I guess a lot of other players, and he's bringing out his best tennis. He's finding his best tennis in the tight moments, but it seems like he has a real handicap in the tight moments to find his best tennis when it comes to playing Djokovic, which again makes sense. I think, is it 10 matches in a row now that he's won, Djokovic?
Yeah, 9 in a row, 10. I think it's 11 and 2. So
it was 9 coming into the final. So
so it's 10 now. So that, to me, that's officially pigeon status. Like, Tsitsipas is Djokovic's pigeon, and they're 1 and 3 in the world now, which is kind of weird to have somebody that high ranked also be somebody that, like, almost like a Davydenko, like Nadal. What is it like? Or like one of those matchups where, like, one guy just always beats the other guy. Usually it's like number 1 ranked and number like 60 ranked. Yeah. Not this now. Now it's the 2 top 5 guys, which is
is it Roger and David Ferrer?
That's one of them. Each of the big 3 have like 4 or 5 guys who they could just call up at any time. And they're just like, "Hey, come over. I'm gonna give you a pounding."
I actually brush shoulders is a slight exaggeration, but was within a meter or 2 anyway, walking past him today. Somebody who has a 2-0 record against Rafa. Do either of you know who that is off the top of your head?
Lucas Rosol?
No, but that's you. You're in the right territory, actually.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything for you.
Dustin Brown.
Oh, yeah. Classic. Yeah.
I didn't know it was 2-0 until I checked, but I knew, of course, about the famous one at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, listen, I've gone off topic. Dustin Brown didn't expect to see his name in an Australian Open 2023 review. Vivek, direct question, but you can take as long as you want with it. Stefanos Tsitsipas, is he going to win a Grand Slam? And if he is, when, where, and why?
I think he is going to win a Grand Slam. I think this performance at the Australian Open was probably the most encouraged I've been by him. I thought there was almost a serenity to not just his play, but the way he handled himself in the post-match interview on the court, and then even the press conferences as well. And you look at the way he spoke after the final about taking the lessons from, sort of getting humbled by Novak in that final. I think I'm really encouraged by that. I think it's really coming together for him. I think Mark Philippoussis has really added an important dynamic to that box of maybe neutralizing some of what his dad brings to the table. And so I think, I honestly think we could see it at this French Open. I think as far as the gap looked at the Australian Open, that is just how dominant Novak is on this surface. And I do think that Tsitsipas will present a serious threat at the French Open. Having said that, if he doesn't get a breakthrough at the French Open, it could be until next year, because I wouldn't fancy his chances at Wimbledon or the US.
Yeah, for some reason he has a tail off in the second half. Go, Stephen.
I'm glad you said that, Vivek. Like so many of the, I don't know about you guys, but so many of the commentators or comments in on my videos on YouTube on the Slice are like, they're so emotional and they're so like dramatic. They're like, oh, he's done. Like Tsitsipas is like, he's never gonna reach peak form. It's like almost like if players aren't winning majors by the time of Alcaraz, then their like careers are over. It's like
Yeah,
it's like in reality, Tsitsipas has 11 more years of health. Should hopefully of healthy, super good tennis coming. And there's no chance that once Djokovic and Nadal leave, which will happen before Tsitsipas does, like he's not going to win slams, I think.
Yeah.
Multiple slams because he is that good. And I'm still very bullish on him. Yeah, Vivek's right. He could win the French Open. He's going to be top 3 contender. I would say we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
And he probably will be at the French Open for the next like 8 years. So why I just can't see him not winning one of those. He arguably should have won one already, in 2021. So yeah, I'm not worried about his future prospects at all. I think this was a good, like Vivek said, a good result for him because he had a weird year last year to me. Like it was a weird year. He was like super fallible in the finals. I think he made 7, but only, lost 5. And it seemed like, he just won all the matches he was supposed to win at the Australian Open, which is a good sign for confidence as a tennis player.
Yeah.
Talking of good tournaments, there were some other players who didn't make the final, but I think there's a strong case to say they had a good tournament. We've already touched on one of them in Tommy Paul, but of course as well, Ben Shelton. Vivek, give me some thoughts on Ben Shelton.
Yeah, just so much fun to watch him play. I think he's really exciting. And, I think when you get a few of these super talented lefties, I think it adds a different dynamic as well when you look to the future of the sport. And so I've really enjoyed watching him. And, to think that this was the first time that he had ever left the States.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I'm just rolling through the Australian Open and having excellent results. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders for being so young. And I thought he took everything in stride. And I think he's a super exciting prospect for the future of tennis. And I'm curious, more so than the French. I would love to see what his game looks like on the grass.
Okay, yeah, good point. By the way, you mentioned about him leaving, the US for the first time, etc. I was thinking to myself, when you're in Europe in particular, your first time out of your country, for British people in particular, ends up being France, of course, and if your nearest neighbor, etc., etc. And I was just thinking to myself, the first time outside of the country, you're getting on a plane, you're going 15, 16, 17 hours or whatever the journey is, and you're also going across the Pacific Ocean. It must feel so weird to then rock up. And anyway, he certainly felt at home. Only his second slam as well, Stephen.
Yeah, no, it was a great tournament for Ben Shelton. Like, what a player. He's clearly going to be a star. He's clearly going to be like very top of the game for years to come. I thought, he had a great draw for him, to be honest. I think he won, like none of the matches he won were actually that surprising, were they? Like the opponents he played were also kind of other like challenger level, like
JJ Wolf, yeah.
Low 100 or,
he
closer to 100.
He got a bit fortunate. Like the third round, he probably should have been playing Fritz and he gets Popper in.
Right.
So
So my point is like he had a favorable draw to help get him to the I guess it was the quarterfinals where they played, which is crazy. And then you did see the difference in class when he played Tommy Paul. Tommy was just able to figure, okay, like, your forehand's huge. Okay, let's see where else you're vulnerable. And he kind of exposed him on the backhand there. But again, it doesn't really matter if your backhand's that weak because his weapons are so big. So his serve and his forehand, and his just general athleticism are absolutely elite. And I don't think I'm shading Ben Shelton at all. Like he already beat Casper Ruud at I think that was Cincinnati. So like he has been, he's a star. He's going to be here. And it's actually crazy because he stepped up because for a while there, like when he beat Casper Ruud, I don't think he'd even won a challenger yet. And then he won 3 in a row to end the year. Because I was kind of saying some things on Twitter because my guy, Canadian Gabriel Diallo, he's like a 6'7" challenger player. He had already won a challenger tour title and he beat Ben Shelton. And then Ben Shelton's getting like way, way, way more hype. And I was like, whoa. That's just because he's American. Let's pump the brakes. Then he wins 3 challengers and makes the quarterfinals of the Australian Open. So I am firmly on the Ben Shelton bandwagon now. and it's all good. So yeah, incredible player and a great tournament for him.
And although I agree with you both in terms of the draw and Fritz and stuff, but Fritz, perfect example, draws open up for Fritz, and yet he still finds a way of getting knocked out. I mean, I know we had Basilashvili in the first round here and Popyrin in the second, but that's 2 slams now, Vivek, back to back. Like I say, he's managed to find himself out of the tournament within a couple of days of it getting underway. And I remember his press conference in New York was like, I don't know how that happened. That cannot happen to me, and that's fine. I get that, but now is it a worrying pattern, Vivek?
I think the reason I'm more discouraged is because of how excited I got by his end of the year and that run to get into the ATP finals. And then look, I mean, honestly, he played well at the ATP finals as well, and so I thought he would take that confidence into the new year. And so to kind of fall flat here, I kind of put him and Félix in that same boat right now in terms of maybe not beating the players that they're supposed to, and maybe rising to the occasion of, those big matchups that they get. And so I think that's something that, he's just going to have to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, this is something that obviously has been a problem for me, the 2 slams in a row, underperforming. And, this was a real opportunity. Obviously, we saw, Félix, who never complains, talk about the balls and the way they feel kind of dead. We don't know if that's, again, both those guys hit heavy balls, right? And so maybe, that hindered them to some degree. But that's that problem-solving element that you have to have at the highest level that maybe that they need to look at carefully and say, hey, I've got to be able to make adjustments.
Stephen, with a nice segue there, and I had Félix already at the image of him losing to Lehecka here already there, but as soon as Vivek says it, I'm like, I'll press that button. Stephen, where are we at with Félix right now? Is it a similar place to Fritz?
I think there's levels to pressure that players feel, and as your ranking improves, there's new pressures that come to you. So for Fritz example, I had him in my top 5 real contenders at the AO, which self-promotion here was an elite top 5 pick. Not too hard, but I had Djokovic, Tsitsipas 1 and 2, and they made the final. But then I had Medvedev, and then I had Fritz, and then Félix. So these 2 guys disappointed me in that way. But when you're Fritz, you should logically be thinking, okay, quarterfinals is the minimum for what I want to make here. I'm a top 8 player. So then you just that pressure internally. There's just no way that these guys don't start thinking like that, because that's athletes do it. They always say, I'm just focusing on the next round, but they have to say that. All right. So, well, they don't have to, but you should say that, and it should, but so I always wonder if it's there's that pressure of I'm not losing in the second round to Popyrin, who, played horrific tennis the day before, or in a match before, somehow won it, and then came out here and played awesome, with the home crowd at his back. And he's obviously can play great. He's a talented player, but it's just tough. Everyone's hard to beat, and you can't be mentally weak out there. And I don't know if that was the case, but you just, I think it was a little bit with Félix, to answer your question. With Félix, the same type of pressures, right? He, to me, was legitimately had a shot of doing serious damage at this tournament. And if he were to face a Djokovic, and Félix played his best game, he could seriously beat him. It wouldn't be it'd be obviously a big upset, but it would be the type of upset that are meant to happen, not like the Istamans in second round. It'd be wow, this young guy who's been here knocking on the door for a number of years beats the best guy. That makes sense. And I think that pressure as well, I don't know how it affects him personally, but I know from watching him and talking to him, lots over the last 6 months, it's just to me, he gets on the court. This is what I always go back to. When he's telling these French hecklers to shut up in Paris, that was peak Félix for me. It's I love that new kind of mentality of the bad boy Félix, a little bit more confidence. You're going to disrespect me for 3 hours. I'm going to tell you to tell you where to stick it. That I like. And then sometimes he gets, if he's not confident in these matches, he gets really, really tense out there. And then guys like Lehecka or, not Kozlov, but I forget who he was playing in the second round. Can really take it to him. Molcan, that's right. Thanks. They can hit big, and they can really get Félix on his back foot, and then he's not as again, his floor level is not as high as other guys. His floor level can drop to where he can lose to, I would say like 100 guys on the tour. So, yeah, I mean, again, he's 22. No reason for panic at all. People get so crazy because, like, I always just think about when Federer started winning majors, and he ended up winning 20, and getting in the GOAT debate. So, and he was basically Felix's age when that all started. So let's pump the brakes on counting Felix out. But yeah, disappointing tournament for him. But I think if those balls had a bit more zip, he would have felt more confident, and not a good excuse for him, but like he would have felt more confident. With the heaviness of his ball doing more damage.
An interesting thing regarding the pressure and Felix, Stephen, is that his best performance at a slam arguably would have been the French Open 4th round against Rafa, I guess it was last year. I'm not saying his best result, or I'm just thinking of a performance that was like, wow, as much as that. I mean, because I think Rafa was off it in a couple of sets, but there was also 2 or 3 sets when Rafa was really on it, especially the 5th one. And maybe he was just like, you know what, the pressure's off me today. There's no expectation. I'm going to go for it, try and play my best tennis. And I think he did, on a surface that we don't necessarily expect him to excel at. And yet here, you mentioned the Molcan match, which I think was 5 sets. He goes out to Lehecka. I also watched him play against, I think it was Cerundolo, was it in the second or third round? And he was pushed a bit there, especially in the second set. I think Cerundolo wins that. It goes 4. The fact that he went out to Lehecka, it was like, this is not really a surprise. He'd been sort of struggling through. And yet, Stephen, as you said, there was so much optimism at the back end of last year. The Paris-Bercy moment you mentioned, but also him winning, I think, 2 or 3 tournaments back to back, and the serve just not getting broken for a while. Was it 3? Is that okay? Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, and not getting broken serve for about 73 years or something like that, etc. When I don't know, Stephen, I just go big on the exaggeration.
Great,
people laugh, and then they don't realize that I didn't know exactly how many service games it was.
It's a tough stat to pull out. That's a tough stat.
It is. It's a tough one, but some people do know it, and they'll be in the live chat on my.
They got it written down. Those are the people who got it written down before coming on.
Well, they can also just go to Google, by the way. So they come back 37, 97. You didn't know that, and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, Vivek, finish off our sort of Felix chat, and then we'll move on to Chapo as well. You can give him some love or otherwise as well.
Yeah, with Felix, I think he's just got to, build on handling pressure, right? And I think to the discussion earlier that Stephen brought to the table, it's one thing to go into a 250 and beat the players you're supposed to beat, and then it's another to go into a Grand Slam and beat the players you're supposed to beat. And he's talked about this as well, acknowledging that, hey, I've earned this ranking. Now this creates an easier draw for me. This creates the opportunity to save the big matchups for later, but you still have to earn those big matchups. And so I think that's the main thing that Felix has got to look at. I think, again, I will say the problem solving in real time is definitely something that he needs to evaluate and try to improve at, because, when you watch him at his best, he's got everything, right? That serve +1 is right at the top with anyone. And then, the backhand at its best can make him a top 3 player, if not, contending for that number 1 spot. So I think it's just these little moments that he needs to improve on, handling the pressure, making adjustments in real time, and then he'll get there. For Shapovalov, I was honestly encouraged with what I saw. I don't think there's any shame in going out to Hubie Hurkacz in the 3rd round. And, for him, he'll probably look at that 5th set, and he already talked about it in terms of not being mentally strong enough to handle that 5th set. And so I think overall, I was pretty encouraged with what I saw. We saw huge dips last year, and him sort of come out of it slowly but surely. And now I think this is a performance that he can be encouraged by. And we're also evaluating both of them now, I think, on a bit of a different scale. Right? We are looking at Felix to be that consistent top 5 player, whereas I think with Chapo, even making the top 10 now would be a huge accomplishment, right? So it is a bit of a different scale that we're looking at these two players now. And so with Félix, maybe we are a bit harder on him because now he's kind of told on himself and he's almost a victim of his own success. And we're evaluating him that way.
Maybe. I think it might have been Stephen was just sort of thinking about my comment regarding Félix and the French Open, and that there is, of course, the one again. I've just remembered the one against Medvedev at Australian Open a year ago. But in a way, that falls into a similar, bracket. Pressure's not super much on him. He's not expected to beat Medvedev. He does have a match point, if memory serves me right, but it was an unreturnable serve. But anyway, listen, Stephen, some final thoughts on Shapo before we move on?
Yeah, Shapo, I like where his game's at. At the end of last year, he started playing the type of tennis that I think he needs to play to beat top guys. And I think he's emotional and he cares so much. So he, admitted that after the Hurkacz loss that he had nerves, right? And I don't know if anyone who's played sports knows what that means. Like, you're just nervous, and in tennis, it's a terrible feeling because there's nowhere to hide. So, and with his game, obviously things can go wrong when you're tight. So, but he, in general, I think he's just, him and his coach, Peter Plansky, have gotten him into a place, like through trial and error, through a long time, to play the mature style of tennis that he needs to play. And he's never going to not miss. So I think some people are looking for that. And they're he's still missing too much. It's like Federer missed his entire career, a lot. He had a lot of unforced errors every match he played, and he, could beat anyone. So it's not about not missing for him. It's about missing in the right times, or, not having too many just dumb things. And he's playing the type of tennis that I'm happy with. So third round loss to Hurkacz is that he wasn't supposed to win that match. So that's okay. I think he can have a great year.
And the last two slams now, that is kind of positive 5-set defeats. If it becomes a pattern, it becomes a bit more of a concern. Right. But I think he was pretty good against Rublev, and I think it was great how I think Rublev was serving for. Interestingly, very similar to the Hurkacz scenario, because Hurkacz was serving for, and I think it goes love 40 that particular game. There were three great matches, by the way, going on at the same time in different stages. I think Korda was against Medvedev going into a first set tiebreaker, while you had deciding moments going on with Tiafoe and Khachanov, who we're going to come to in a second. And of course, the culmination of that Shapo match with Hurkacz, and they all have, and it was sort of flitting between the TV screens. It was actually one of the peaks, along with Andy Murray, of the tournament in that sort of 5 minutes, because we got two matches decided, and arguably as well the Medvedev match was decided in that first set. By the way, where are we at with Medvedev right now, Vivek?
I think we're, in that same in-between phase. I think you look at that match against Seb Korda, you're probably thinking this is an opportunity, if you're viewing it from his perspective, saying this is an opportunity to make a statement, taking on someone who's had, arguably the hottest start to the year outside of Novak Djokovic on the men's side. And I think it was a very competitive match for what the final score was. But I think Medvedev in these conditions, compared to, what we saw of him in 2019 and what we generally expect of him, he's still below expectations. And I think all the expectations that have come since he became world number one have kind of taken its toll. Obviously, he was unfortunate to miss out in that middle stretch of the season last year with Wimbledon and whatnot, and unfairly being, penalized and not being able to play. But I think all of that has taken its toll, and it seems easier to crack him in that aspect now than it was before.
There seems to be a vulnerability, and the problem, I would say, with, as opposed to pretty much any other player that we've mentioned already, Tsitsipas, Shapo, Félix, whatever, I'm probably more concerned about Medvedev, because it's a year, and it's a year of just nowhere near coming to the level. I think his best result, I know he's won a couple of tournaments, a 250 and a 500, but arguably his best result was a semi-final in Cincinnati, and even that, he includes a loss to Tsitsipas, who he's generally, been the boss of. So for me, I think there's a lot of concerns. I know we all look at that love 40 moment in the Rafa final of 2022, and maybe it's just an easy thing, but it does seem to have been now. It's over 12 months of just underachievement. Stephen, if you want to finish on Medvedev, but then I'll move on to Khachanov.
Yeah, you guys are all hitting the nail on the head. I have optimism for him. Like he has had a weird 2022 year with all that you guys mentioned, especially similar to Tsitsipas, like a brain injury moment when, you lose a match. Arguably, I think Medvedev was even more in control, like much more in control of that match than Stefanos was. Yeah. And to me, that was more of a choke than Stefanos's was. And then, I don't know. I just think now he's coming. He's like 12th in the world, which is crazy. So now he's going to come play that villain role again, where he's kind of like the underdog coming up the ranks. And I think he's much more comfortable and plays better tennis in that role. Anytime he was the number one, he like didn't play well. And, when he was like the counter, when he was like the guy who's going to play spoiler at the US Open, 2021, he played exactly how he needed to and like got over the line versus Djokovic, which even though Djokovic was like mentally collapsing, like it was like still not easy to do. Like he could have got broken there, or like got broken right at the end and could have let it go. So anyways, he's going to play the villain role, and I predict he will be back in the top 5 by the end of the year. That's my prediction.
Khachanov. Is he just been lucky with draws and runs, because he has got 2 semi-finals in a row, but he's still not beating anyone in the top 10? Is it 20 matches in a row, something like that? 21 it might, because they might well have been 20 going into the Tsitsipas match. Is he just making the most of it while he can, or is there something I'm missing regarding Khachanov, Stephen?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. I think, if he's not beating any top 10 players and he's making 2 semifinals in a row, he's getting helped out by the draws for sure. But he's a great player. Like we forget he is talented. Like he beat Djokovic in Paris-Bercy, like what is that, 2019 or 2018 final to win, which is kind of crazy. But so he's got it there, but I do think he's kind of reached his ceiling. And if Karen's watching this, I'd love you to prove me wrong. I always say that, but I think he's kind of just reached his ceiling as far as where his game can get to. His forehands, everything's huge. He's a great player. I think his ranking can improve. I think he can get back in the top 10. But yeah, he's doing that same thing. He's like winning all the matches he should, losing all the matches he should. And then sometimes the draw allows you to get to the semifinals, which it has twice in a row. So it'll be interesting to see, I don't think Clay's his best, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see the results for the rest of the year. But seems like a great guy, great player, but I don't think he's going to be winning majors ever.
In soccer terms, Vivek, this is the kind of thing that Ferguson would put up on the wall to motivate his team. He would clip what Stephen just said there, put it on the wall, and every time he goes out to take the court, it'd be like boom, and then he'll be winning a slam, and he'll be going, Stephen from the Slice on Talking Tennis was saying this and that, and this proves him wrong.
I would love that. That would be the highlight of my journalistic career, getting used as fuel to fuel someone's slam win.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I agree with Stephen. I think what I will say is, with his current game, he has absolutely reached his ceiling. He is definitely extracting the maximum out of what his current game is. His backhand is too weak, and he comes to the net nowhere near enough. Frankly, it's non-existent at this point. So I think he should look at someone like a Matteo Berrettini and say, that's a guy with a weak backhand, but whose ceiling is higher than mine. And Berrettini will take those, serve and volley opportunities. He will come to the net when he's playing on grass. And that's something that Khachanov needs to add to his game. And so I think if you want to even take some inspiration from Sabalenka and say, hey, this is someone who completely reworked her serve and now has become a Grand Slam champion, I need to rework my backhand. My grip is not favorable. I'm only able to hit it flat. And, and in that case, unless it's really dropping short for me, there's nothing I can really do with it. I think if you go back to the drawing board and say, hey, I'm just going to rework this shot, maybe in time he can achieve a higher ceiling. Maybe for some time he will drop down the rankings to actually fix it. But I think if he wants to achieve a different type of ceiling, that's what he would need to do.
I don't know if Paul in the live chat is telling us about Khachanov going to be going on a 374-week run at number 1, or perhaps Paul is referring to somebody else who we touched upon at the beginning of the show. Listen, let's come to one more player before we finish, because there is a sort of gaping hole in the Australian Open resume, or any men's tournament resume, if you like, and that is Rafa Nadal. Stephen, where are we at? I'm glad, by the way, Paul appreciates the joke. I'm glad he does. Where are we at with Rafa? I mean, he's on this run now, I think it is, of like 2 or 3 wins out of, a dozen or so matches. Of course, we've had a couple of injuries during that period. But are we talking about the R word? Where are we at with this, Stephen?
It's hard to know, because it could be like so many other years where he's not done well at the Australian Open, or lost, in general, and then comes into the French or the clay swing looking revitalized and looking great. So I've learned that lesson too many times to say it's over, but it doesn't look good. Like, does it? It obviously does not look good. He looks very beatable to anyone to a lot of players on tour. But that's going to change. I'll tell you that for free. That's going to change when it gets to the clay, if he's healthy. So I don't know. There's not, I think it's insane last year that he had the run, that he won the Australian Open, which was great. And then he won the French Open, which makes a lot more sense, but he also just played great, really good in between, aside from some other injuries. So yeah, like, it's not too crazy to me that at 36, he's not, playing great, and he has injuries at the Australian Open, but then he'll show up at his best surface, I think, playing well. But yeah, basically this level, and shouldn't surprise us, I think, in this career. We got to remember, it's surprising when they keep winning, and it's actually not surprising when they play bad at 36. Like, it's actually surprising when they're dominant, like they have been. So,
Vivek, what do you think about Rafa's upcoming clay court swing, assuming that this injury does heal in the sort of 6 to 8 week time frame that he's mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, if he recovers in time, which it looks like he will, I expect him to be the favorite at the French Open. I think he's earned that. I think he has been as dominant on a surface as anyone, and so I think he's always one French Open away from having momentum on his side, and I would not be surprised if he showed up the French Open and took the title. I think when he's evaluating what's left in the tank, I do think the perfect scenario for him to leave the sport is at Paris next year, representing Spain at the Olympics. And so I think, looking at that down the line, he'll probably say, okay, I've got, these next 5 slams. Let me give everything I have, and then I can say goodbye on my terms. So, I thought, a sneaky thing that might have aided him as well was probably the fact that he played Novak earlier in the tournament at Roland Garros. And I think, coming off that win over Félix, I think he was in really good spirits and really feeling good about his game. And I thought that worked out perfectly. I think, when they play in the semis or the finals, and having that many hours on the court going into a matchup against Djokovic, I think that's where maybe Djokovic can wear him down a little bit more. And we saw that at the semis in 2021. So I think that's the key, when those two would potentially match up at the French Open, in determining how good his chances look.
Yeah, I like the time frame in terms of the Olympics next year, Vivek, and I can see, let's just say, the next 12 months goes a similar way, stop-start with injuries, some good moments, but largely a lot of defeats, if you like. I can see him still going, do you know what, I could just play doubles at the French Open. By the way, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but that is one possible route. However, I don't think he knows yet really what the next 6 weeks, 6 months, never mind 2 years, are going to be like. The only tiny clue might be a couple of things. First of all, I think he was a bit surprised about some things that have gone on the court. Maybe the way he lost in Paris-Bercy, and then also the defeats indoors in Turin. I know there's this record about him indoors and the rest of it, but he's still a very, very good. He's still a top 5 player indoors. But I also think maybe that the tears that his wife showed, in Melbourne was kind of indicative that she maybe, and also the tears that, of course, that he shared with Roger last year, is almost like, this is going to be me soon. Don't know when, but soon. But yeah, just don't know. He could, a year ago or less than a year ago, during that French Open run, I'm sure the retirement word did go through his mind with the foot and everything else. But now it seems to be other things, but at least it's not like the knee and then it breaks down. It's the knee and then it breaks down. I think I'd rather it be different parts of the body, if it makes sense. I know other people might think otherwise, but in a way, if it was recurring with the same part of the body, maybe there would be greater cause for concern. But I'm optimistic that we'll see him for the clay court season, and fingers crossed he doesn't miss the French Open, because it's the one with, I think, the exception of the first couple of years of his career, and there was another time when he pulled out. But he's probably made more French Open appearances than he has Wimbledon or US Open anyway. Off the top of my head, I would say that, just because he always seems to be fit for that, and understandably so. Listen, any final Australian Open thoughts, Stephen, before we wrap this up?
No, I think we dissected it thoroughly.
I think so too. Listen, Vivek, you can say something about the Australian Open. Just a little bit underwhelming, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure if we got some of those big matchups, we'd be looking at it a bit differently. In terms of a final thing I'd like to just add, obviously we were talking about the men, but I am of Indian descent. So Sania Mirza saying goodbye to Grand Slam tennis. She's done incredible things for the country and for women and for Muslim women. And so to get that goodbye, obviously would have loved to see her win that final, but to get to the final in itself was a huge accomplishment. And obviously a pretty emotional speech that she gave. And yeah, just super grateful for what she's accomplished. Winning 6 slams, 3 in mixed and 3 in the women's doubles. And across the two, she's won all 4. So I think that's a lot to be proud of.
Vivek, we're going to do a doubles show at some point in the next 24 to 48 hours as well. So that's cool. And of course, she will get a mention, as will Krejcikova and many others that have done well down under. Listen, both of you, thank you very much for stopping by.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for having us on, John.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. And hopefully we cross paths again sometime soon. And guys, I'm going to play a little music outro that goes somewhere between 3, 6, and 10 minutes. So you can just sail off into the Vancouver and Toronto sunset. Doesn't really work at 10 a.m. or 1 p.m., but you know what I mean. So guys, Take care. I'm going to play this music and just shut down, basically. See you guys.
See ya.
See ya.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.